Hey guys, what is going on, my people? Welcome to the Modern Leadership Book Club. If you are just joining us, this is the first video you're seeing. We are a business leadership book club where we break down the most impactful leadership books, not only so that we can grow our business exponentially, but also use it in our personal lives. And we do that on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We are diving into Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Today is round number 2, actually call number 2. I'll leave the first one in the description for you guys if you're just joining. But if you are somebody who's been a part of our group, which Edith is here, great to have you here. We are going to do a quick roll call in a minute. I want to hear who is present today. And as we go through this book, I want you guys to share your key takeaways and your key moments from the book. It is great when you get to hear somebody kind of share what their biggest wins are. But it's even better when you get to share yours because it's the exponential power of growing as a team. That's the reason why we put this book club together. And that's the reason why we also picked this incredible book. So guys, welcome to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. We help entrepreneurs become modern leaders so they can excel both in their personal life and their professional life without sacrificing family time or burning themselves out. We do that many different ways, one of which is the book club. I'll leave you the link inside of the show notes or inside of the description if you love to join the book club. But we come here live every single Thursday, and then you have free access into the app, into my free private app, so that we can discuss some of the things that we're talking about. So when it comes to the first couple chapters, which is what we went over last week, they were really powerful. I know she initially started off talking about like how we create culture of like powerful leaders who are willing to be vulnerable and like what you can expect out of having those types of cultures. She followed that up with like all of the myths around vulnerability. And we went down every single one of those piece by piece. Now today, what we're diving into is we're going to start diving into the call to courage, which is section number 2. This one like spoke really, really loud to me. And then we'll follow this up with the next one, which talks a lot about like the armor that we have for ourselves. And when we like see and experience vulnerable moments, like the different opportunities and paths that we can go. One is the path of like our ego is what she talks about. And the other path is where we're willing to dare to lead. Because honestly, if you read this book, it is so much grounded in a lot of life coaching philosophies, but also a lot of like John Maxwell like philosophies where you have to model the behavior yourself, right? Being willing to model that behavior yourself is going to naturally attract other leaders who are powerful, who are vulnerable, who are willing to share. And by doing that, it's going to create a massive influence, not only you, but for your entire culture. So we're going to dive right in. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of roll call. Edith, I know Edith is here. We have several other people who are here. If you are here, I want to hear, number 1, are you reading the book already? And number 2, if you are, what has been your biggest aha moment so far since picking up this book? Now, for me personally, just to give you a couple ideas of like what I typically do when I read a book, I grab the physical book. As you can kind of see, I have like a whole bunch of things that are like labeled here. I don't typically do that. Normally, I'll just highlight it so that I can go back and reread it faster next time. But also what I do is I also listen to the audio while I'm actually walking. So I went on a walk right before this, and I listened to these two sections. And it really helped give me a little bit deeper of a dive here today. So I'm going to be able to show up on an entirely different level than I did last week. But also I want to do this in the fastest time possible, okay? So as we go, you're going to hear my takeaways, but I also want to hear your takeaways too, okay? So section number 2, let's start off with the call to courage. One of the things that was really like an aha moment for me by reading this section was she shared where she was in a vulnerable situation. I guess at the time, she was putting a lot of like time crunches on her team. And her team decided to get together and have what she coins a rumble, having a conversation where you have to be a little bit vulnerable. But they were basically approaching her saying, hey, Brené, like your timelines are just off the charts. I mean, they're not helpful at all. Like you tell us like you have to all this stuff done in a short period of time, and it's just not physically possible. And it's creating this culture of like everybody's feeling uncomfortable. She kind of shares like how she initially felt when she had that conversation. She said one of the things that really stuck out to me is clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Meaning that when we're having those conversations, really being willing to be clear with your directions and not just be like, when you're having conversations, like beat around the bush or just say things like, oh yeah, I'm going to work on that. No, I'm going to be working on that, from here on out, as opposed to being willing to lean in and ask questions like she did, where she's like, okay, like I definitely need to work on this, but tell me a little bit more about this. Tell me a little bit about how this is actually affecting you. Tell me a little bit about like what's going on for you in your experience, right? This is that moment when you can either lean in and be vulnerable and be like, okay, there must be some issues here because this entire room is telling me that I have this issue. And you ask them, give you more details. She's like, hey, tell me when this has like rubbed you the wrong way. Tell me when this has actually pushed you down the wrong path. Tell me when this, and having that conversation, people bring up, well, it did this and this and this and this, which as a leader can sometimes be very difficult to hear, but it's kind of like one of those things. I always think about it this way. It's like, would I much rather not know about it and then not be able to fix it? Or do I want to know about it, right? My kids teach me this all the time. It's like, man, would I really just rather not know that kind of like happened? But at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to know about it so that I can make the site corrections as the leader that I need to. And if I'm in the dark, I literally have a video and it's kind of like going semi-viral right now where it's like why people keep secrets from you. And it's because if we aren't willing to be vulnerable, if we aren't willing to like open up and to ask them more questions, then we kind of feel like we're shoving them and pushing them away. So Shannon, what's going on? Good morning. Good morning. So that one was extremely powerful to me. And it's something I need to work on a lot more is being willing to ask follow-up questions when somebody says that, hey, I'm a little bit off track or something I'm doing is not showing up for the best version of me for them. I need to get better at asking more questions in terms of like, okay, give me an example. Like, tell me what this experience is like, because the more that I know, the more that I can approach that from that. She said, this is what she decided to do. After having this conversation, was a little bit vulnerable, a little bit like uncomfortable of a conversation. She said, I listened to them and I thanked them for their courage and honesty and promised again that I would think about it and asked if we could circle back the next day. I think that's a key part because I know that a lot of people, myself included as a leader, sometimes we just want to push whatever is going down right now down and then not circle back and not talk about it. But a really great way to like load this up and to make people tell them that you're serious about this is to make sure you say, hey, and we're going to circle back with around this tomorrow. Okay. I need to really think about this. I really need to process it. I need to think about what the lessons are going to be. And then I'll circle back with it tomorrow. It kind of gives us a timeline, but it also, with us verbalizing, it makes sure that they know that this is important to us, or we wouldn't have even said that. So this is something I definitely need to use, this whole circle back, because my brain always tells me I have to figure it out right then in that specific moment. And if I don't, like, I'm going to be thinking about it and it's just going to be overwhelming and all that kind of stuff. But in reality, that's not the truth. We all make better decisions when we're not emotional, right? Like if I'm angry or frustrated or hungry or lonely or tired or any of those halt things, I know that I always don't make the best decisions. So sometimes when I'm feeling a little vulnerable, I have to make sure that I say, hey, let's circle back tomorrow, because it tells them basically that it is important to me, which it is important to me. Okay, so that was that first part. The second part is when we're in fear. She says, when we're in fear or an emotion is driving self-protection, there's a fairly predictable pattern of how we assemble our armor piece by piece. So I want to go through this because this was another aha moment for me, is the process that happens when we experience something vulnerable to go from this all the way from the top, all the way to the bottom, which is like, I'm better than you. And it's kind of weird to even say that out loud, but this is the process that she found in her research, all right? She's like, anytime that we have something that pops up in our armor, which I really love how she described this. She basically said that like our heart is the key to everything. That is where the treasure really is. It's in our heart. But when we put armor on, a lot of that is like ego. We put things up so that we can protect our heart. But it also prevents us from actually really connecting with our heart. And so when we put this fake armor on, or this armor on over it, we don't allow people to see our heart. We don't allow our people to get vulnerable, but then they don't have access to our heart and they don't know that how much we care about them, and they don't really see the parts that they absolutely need to see. Instead, we put our armor on. And I keep hitting my microphone. Sorry about that. But some of the processes that we go through when in that moment of being vulnerable, like somebody says, hey, you know what, Mark, like your energy is like a little bit too much for me, right? It's very easy for me to kind of like shut down and for me to go through these steps, immediately, automatically through my subconscious mind. Now, I know a lot of you guys are push coaches. You've graduated from our PCCS school, and so you understand how our subconscious mind works. It just happens automatically. But this is how it happens automatically when we start to experience some type of vulnerability, and how we can talk ourselves out of stepping out of our armor and instead keeping our armor up. She said the first process is you start thinking about it, I'm not enough. So I'm not enough. Anytime you feel like I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, like I'm not a good enough leader, like I'm not whatever, like that's generally one of those things that your armor wants to be thrown up for. Number 2 is if I'm honest with them about what's happening, they'll think less of me or maybe even use it against me. This is that lack scarcity head voice that we talk about inside of our certification, right? So if I'm honest with them about what's happening, they'll think less of me or maybe even use it against me. And so of course the armor will go back up, right? Number 3 is no way I'm going to be honest about this. No one else does. Why do I have to put myself out there? This is that process. Now you're getting to that level 3, right? Number 4 is, yeah, screw them. I don't see them being honest about what scares them, and they've got plenty of issues. See how this is kind of going down that path, and it's going down towards resentment. The next one is, it's actually their issues and shortcomings that make me act this way. This is their fault, and they're trying to blame me. Now we're kind of like making it being us be the victim, right? And then the 6th one is, in fact, now that I think about it, I'm actually better than them. Now, it kind of sucks to say that out loud, and we don't consciously think through this, but because of her research going through this process, I know it's also something that can automatically happen to us in our subconscious mind. I mean, I've actually seen it happen to myself, and I stop myself before I take action on any of that, going, that doesn't make any sense. All it's trying to do is protect me, and in reality, I need to lean into this situation better. But sometimes that's what happens in our subconscious mind. It just happens automatically. So when you start seeing this and you start making it mean something about you and then making it mean something ultimately at the end about them, you got to stop. You got to go, okay, like I actually remember reading about this. This is something that I'm putting up my armor because my ego wants to protect me, all right? And this actually is these moments, guys, give us the best opportunity to lead from the front. That's what I love about like a lot of what she's talking about here with all of her shame research and guilt research and humiliation research. It's something that I've spent some time on, not to this level where like she's really diving in. I love actually seeing all the numbers and all of the details from all of the studies that she has. But really it's like understanding that it's the moments that are the most difficult that you have the greatest opportunity to lead. Not just in your business, not just in your family, not just with you, but with everything. Every time there's an opportunity to be vulnerable, every time there's an opportunity that's difficult, that's you're struggling with, having a difficult conversation with somebody, absolutely, right? It's your greatest opportunity to develop into the type of leader that you want to be. So when we have those things we're going through, it doesn't feel good in that moment, but remember to focus on that story. The story is like, this actually is going to be a great opportunity for me to become the type of leader that I want to become. And you step into that, and I promise you, you will, okay? She writes here, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. That's a great story, right? The cave, which is right in here, that you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So leaning into that vulnerability, right? She talks about, she even talks about this thing called permission slips, where when she does get together, she has people fill out permission slips. And what permission slips are, is they give themselves permission to do something. I give myself permission to listen to everything. I give myself permission to talk up, even if I don't have experience in this area. I give myself permission to, and you do whatever it is you want to write down, but basically you're giving yourself permission to do the vulnerable things up front. So before it gets to that point where it's a little bit uncomfortable, you can actually write down and say, I mean, right after this, I have a call with one of my mentors, Josh Coates. And so one of the things that I could do is I could just take a pen and paper and I could write down, like, I give myself permission to speak up when I get the feeling that I need to speak up, even if I'm scared and nervous. And what that does is it kind of like gives us an opportunity to look down and go, oh, okay, this is the permission slip that I gave myself. And it'll give you a little bit more of an oomph to actually do those things that you need to do, right? I love that idea of permission slips, all right? All right, so she talked about like once she had this conversation with them and she said, let me get a day to kind of think about it. She went home, she thought about it, she figured it out, and she came up with like 4 different lessons that she learned from that, and she brought those back to the meeting. And so what she decided to do was to tell them about all these 4 different lessons that she learned from this, while also telling them to hold her accountable. And I love that because one of the things that I try to do is I try to learn lessons every single day from like my life and my experiences and what's kind of like going on, because that's what I think evolution is as a leader. But also doing this, like when it comes to like a difficult situation in business, really being able to say, hey, you know what, can we get back to this? Let's circle back to it tomorrow. And then literally take the time to pull out all of all of the lessons from that and then bringing them back to everybody, it really does show you really care. But think about the message that you're passing on to the other people inside of your organization or inside of your group. It's like, I cared enough to focus my time and attention on this and to like actually pull these wins out so I can come back and share them with you, right? That is an incredible amount of vulnerability. But in reality, what you're doing is you're modeling the behavior because you want them to do that too, okay? I love that part. Love the part. By the way, anybody love this part of the book just as much as me? She said this one piece. She said a lot of pieces. One of these things that stuck out to me was like, she says, I've yet to be in a rumble or any tough conversation, even where I'm 99% sure that I'm totally in the clear, in which after digging in, I didn't have a part to play. Even if my part was not speaking up or staying curious. So we're big believers in asking ourselves, what's my part? What part do I play in this situation? That is such a key question for leaders, for parents, for business owners, for everything, right? Now, I want to make sure that you don't go down the path of using this to beat yourself up, because that's not what she means. What she means is just figuring out like your part of the equation. It's kind of like the whole taking ownership of my part, right? Not taking ownership of other people or what other people reacted or how they feel or anything like that, which she talks about later. And I love that she brought that up. But in reality, it's like taking ownership of the part that you can control, which is between your two ears and the actions and the behaviors and the things that you specifically do, right? And being able to do that, having those tough conversations, there's always at least something that you can point your finger and say, hey, you know what, I could have done this, I could have done that. Not to beat yourself up, but to continue to get better. Now, a little bit, I'm going to fast forward a little bit through the book. There is another situation where this Air Force, I don't know if it was a general, where she actually experienced some vulnerable moments while she was giving a presentation. She talked to the people in the Air Force about being lonely, which is not something that typically gets talked about, I guess, in the Air Force. I can tell you as a police officer, we don't go into roll call talking about being lonely, but that's definitely something that we need to talk about, because I guarantee you there's people who feel that way, right? And so that's another story. Definitely hit that one up if you haven't hit that one up yet, all right? Now, there is one quote that I want to pull from this chapter before we get into the next one that I really like connected with. It says, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings, or squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage ineffective and unproductive behavior. Let me say that again. Leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to fears and feelings, meaning not pushing them down, not moving past them, not just saying, suck it up, buttercup, which I heard so many times over my police career. Or what you can do instead is squander an unreasonable amount of time trying to manage ineffective and unproductive behavior. Like they say, you take care of the small things, the big things will work themselves out, right? But if you ignore them, if you tell people to push it down, or if you tell yourself, which is like, for me, it's like the most hard thing. It's like trying to just say, hey, I just gotta get through this. Just push it down, Mark. That is not a good experience for me. And I got to lean into not doing that anymore. But being willing to use a little bit of time right now to actually bring it up, talk about it, have conversations, rather than later down the line having to deal with all the repercussions of not doing that. It's so much easier and better to do it right now, right? Okay, let's jump into section number 3. Now, section number 3, I didn't get all the way through. We're going to go through maybe like 3 or 4 of these. And what section number 3 is all about this idea of like wholeheartedness, right? Is being able to live within your heart and open your heart up to other people, and being willing to do those things, being vulnerable, having conversations, doing those kind of things that really get people to not only feel that empathy, but also to really, truly influence them, all right? So that's what this chapter is about. Now, what she did is she brought up, I think there's like 16. There's 16 different times that she has seen. The 3 that I want to talk about today are the top ones, when people put up their armor, and how you can flip it around and becoming a daring leader instead, which means taking off your armor instead of leaning into this armor that we use to protect ourselves, to not have the difficult conversations in that moment, which we know then pushes it off to harder conversations at the end. It's one of those things where if you don't solve the problem right now, it's not going to go away. I like to talk about this also like buffering. This is kind of like the same idea and concept that we'll talk about today. But when I teach about buffering, I like to describe it like this. Like if you're trying to clean your house, like your house is dirty. You're like, oh my God, my house is so dirty. You could turn off the lights, which kind of temporarily solves your problem because you don't see that your house is dirty. But then when you turn your light on, You notice that the house is dirty. As a matter of fact, it's probably dirtier because my daughter like left a food plate underneath her when she was trying to sneak in some food. She left it under her bed, and now it's like having mold, right? And so it doesn't solve the problem to turn the lights off. You got to turn the lights on and just get into cleaning, right? And that'll solve your problem so that in the future you don't have those additional ones, right? I know it's such a hard thing to do, but it's also something that is the greatest opportunity for us, right? One of the things that she did bring up over and over and over again, as we get into these 16, I'm going to go over the top 3 today, was talking about this idea of like ego. And ego is there to protect us. It will throw itself up here to prevent us from being vulnerable. I know for me personally, this happens a lot with like my kids. Like if they say or do or act in a way that when I was younger, like I would have gotten scolded or upset or gotten spanked or all those good things, right? My thought process goes into like, who do you think you're talking to? Like, you don't talk to me that way. You don't. And I know there's like a certain respect thing here too, but there's also a way for me to respond instead of react to that. And I know early on, I used to react a lot. I was the angry person for a long time. I still have moments where I need to get that more under control. But when I think about this, it's like, it's all my ego of like who I am to them, why they should listen to me, why they shouldn't do those things. And anytime that ego thing pops up and I immediately react, I always have to go back and apologize later because I was not in the right. There could have been another way for me to communicate how, whether it is like, hey, to show me more respect or whatever, there's a different way to communicate that way rather than raising my voice or getting angry or getting frustrated or doing any of those kind of things that I have to apologize for later. And so anytime our egos kind of like pop up, it's one of those things for me now is instead of it like me just reacting to it, I think about it and go, oh God, this is like a good opportunity for me. I need to make sure that I pay attention to this because my ego is telling me to go this path. And I know that that's not the path that I want to go. And it gives me this perspective. And I think that's really why she wanted to go over these 16 things, because like they always say, like, if you aren't aware of it, you can't change it, you can't fix it, you can't adjust it, you can't evolve from it, you can't grow from it. You have to become aware of it. So when we see these issues that are coming up, many of them I still struggle with, like it gives us a great opportunity to, as we go, to remind ourselves. As a matter of fact, like since reading this book, I've had like 3 or 4 moments to be vulnerable with my kids, especially because I'm literally going through this. And I'm like, oh man, this is so fresh in my head. I have to do this, right? As a matter of fact, can I just be completely honest? The reason why I put a book club together is because I want to hold myself accountable to all these things myself. And when I'm teaching in a book club or when I'm like reading what my biggest takeaways are, you know how hard it is for me to go against what it is that I'm actually learning? Yeah, super hard. And that's one of the reasons why I do this is because I want to, number one, be able to share all of these like tips of wisdom from Brené to you guys and to me, but also because I want to hold myself to a higher standard. So I don't know, maybe you guys need to start a book club. I don't know. Okay, so let's see. Let's talk about these different situations, all right? And these are, I'm going to go over just the top 3 and we'll end this video and we'll go into the next ones in our next, on next Thursday, okay? So she says, below are 16 examples of armored leadership that emerged from our current research, along with daring leadership responses to each one. Number 1, and this is the one that I struggle with the most, is driving perfectionism and fostering fear of failure. She talks about this one being the number 1 because so many times we mask perfectionism as we want to be, we want to get even better. We want this to be perfect. We want it to be great. And it's really what it is. She says it's actually a self-protection mechanism. She says perfection is not about healthy achievement and growth. Perfectionism is a defensive move. Think about this. When we want to be perfect, a lot of times it's because we care what other people are going to think or say or do or respond from what it is that we're doing. And so we want to protect ourselves. So we have to realize that perfectionism is not self-improvement. Perfectionism is trying to block us from actually growing, right? Block us from doing those things. Block us from pushing like record on my first YouTube video, right? And being totally embarrassed years and years and years later going, oh my gosh, like I got a lot to work on right now, but back then, like you couldn't even see me. It looked like I was just like a pair of teeth talking, right? And I don't even know what I was talking about, even after watching the video today. But it's all about like that process of getting started and not having to be perfect. She says, perfectionism is not self-improvement. Perfection is, at its core, about trying to earn other people's approval. Most perfectionists grew up being praised for achievement and performance, And somewhere along the line, they adopted this dangerous and debilitating belief system. I am what I accomplish and how well I accomplish it. That is very, very dangerous, right? Because in order for us to be able to accomplish things, we have to be willing to make mistakes. We have to be willing to open up our heart, right? To put like all the time and energy into something and have somebody say that like it's terrible, right? One of the things that I always think about this is like, people are going to always have their opinions. Right now, my son, he is in 8th grade. He is going to do a presentation on Friday for like some science. And one of the things that he's been doing is, as the other kids have been doing it, he's been using that against himself in terms of, I got to start mine all over. I got to do mine all over. It's not perfect. It doesn't look like everybody else's. It doesn't do this. And I'm trying to instill in him that it's not supposed to look like everybody else's. It's supposed to look like his, and that it's not the idea of perfection. It's the idea of being willing to get up there and just have this discussion and do it, knowing that, it could go wrong, but in reality, like, you're going to learn and grow so much through this experience that it's not about perfection and beating yourself up and comparing yourself to others and doing all that kind of stuff. Now, trying to tell that to an 8th grader is a little bit difficult. I have to tell him more, guess what? Through my actions. Through my actions. And so I was having a conversation. He's like, Dad, when you go on stage and you're talking to hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, like, do you ever get nervous? I'm like, buddy, I get super nervous. And he's like, oh, what do you do? And I'm like, I just walk out there and I pick 2 people. One person on this side, maybe it's like a friend, a coach, Teresa, somebody that I love, whatever, and then somebody else on this side. So that way it looks like I'm looking at the entire crowd, but I'm just speaking to these 2 people. And he's like, oh. He's like, maybe I can talk to my teacher in the back, like, because one of his teachers like sits in the back. Maybe I could just like look at her because she's like the assistant teacher. And I'm like, 100% you can do that if that's something you think would be super helpful. But just remember, like, this is your presentation. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just the way it is, right? But it gives us a great opportunity to show them with our behavior, not through our words, right? I don't want to just tell them like, no, I'm never nervous. I just get up and I just perform. No, I'm nervous every single time. Even before I hit the live button here, I get nervous. It's just the same thing. It's just this natural fear of like being in front of people. But in reality, I know that that's just my brain trying to keep me safe, right? That's just my armor trying to be thrown up so I don't have to do anything new. So I don't have to put myself out there and risk the fear of rejection. But in reality, like, you don't get to have success if you don't risk any fear of rejection, right? And this is the last point I was trying to make when I first started, is like, people are going to have opinions of you no matter what. Every single one of you guys on this call has an opinion of me. Shannon and Edith and Julie, I love you guys so much. You guys probably have a good opinion, I hope, but it doesn't matter. Like, there's going to be people who are going to watch this and they're going to be like, you know what? I don't like Mark. I don't like this book. I don't like him. I don't like his hair. Everybody's going to have opinions. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, but they're none of which we can control, but we can control the ones that we focus on, right? Now, one of the things she said is having conversations about perfectionism within trusting and brave teams can be healing and powerful. So the opposite of like expecting everybody to be perfect, if you're the leader trying to get everybody to be perfect, realizing that, letting them know that perfection doesn't exist. We're in here to take action. We want to do as best as we can, but that's what we can do. And we can all grow from these experiences, but having conversations. You're going to see through most of these, and I love the way that she breaks it down. She's talking a lot about just having conversations about it. Instead of ignoring it, instead of like just saying, hey, it has to be perfect, just having conversations will lighten the mood and will get people to realize that it doesn't have to be perfect, right? All right, that was the first one. The second one is, she says, working from scarcity and squandering opportunities for joy and recognition. So let's talk about working from scarcity. This one really, really connected with me, because working from scarcity is like, I'm doing this thing because like, I've got to do it right now, because if I don't, like, this idea is going to be taken, right? I've got to reach out to these customers, because if not, they're not going to want to join me. I've got to do this like all right in this very minute, because there's not enough in the world. I got to make money right now because I'm not going to be able to have enough later. And when we do that, we kind of like manifest that there is less in the world. Because when we're focused on scarcity, even when we have something amazing that happens, our brain goes into, but this could be taken from me. Okay, I have an awesome business. So like right now, Teresa and I are now working full-time, which is, by the way, pretty incredible when you can on Wednesday decide to go out for like a date breakfast or something like that after the kids go to school. It's incredible. I'm glad I worked my butt off in order to get it. But like, we get to this point where now I say retired full-time. We're full-time coaches at home, right? We're making more than when I was on my police career and she was in her corporate world. But it could be very easy for my brain to go like, but Mark, you got to keep working. You got to keep doing this. Like, if you don't, like, it's all going to be taken away. That is kind of the scarcity mindset. And when you lean into that, you'll notice that you'll start taking actions of scarcity driven people. And then you'll start to feel like when you're having conversations with people that like you're needy or wanty. What's crazy is like I have conversations about having one-on-one coaching clients, right? And so I'm just having conversations not because I'm like, oh my God, if I don't get a one-on-one coaching client, like I'm not going to succeed. It's more like I just want to help out as many people as I humanly can. So I'll talk about my one-on-one coaching opportunities all the time. And if they don't, that's totally cool. And I just keep moving on. And what's crazy is like people present themselves and go, Mark, I really would love to work one-on-one with you. I want to have these kind of results. I want to experience this in my business. And it gives me a great opportunity because I'm not like feeling like it's desperate for either of us. It's like, if it falls into alignment, that's cool. But if I had just been focused on scarcity and lack, which I had for a very long time, my scarcity and lack, guys, with time, I don't have time. What's crazy is when I was focused on scarcity, I was a police officer. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a business, and I was unhealthy. I was about 100 pounds overweight. I said I didn't have time. And that's crazy because like right now, I was a full-time police sergeant. I have my own life coach certification with Josh Coates. I like have multiple like one-on-one coaching programs, a whole bunch of like leadership programs. I have 2 kids. My wife, we go out on date days like as many times as we can per month. At least one time per month per kid and with Teresa. And what's crazy is I have the same amount of time. And it's because I just started to think about time a little differently. I didn't think of it as a scarcity mindset. And I got some personal growth around it, all right? It's not one of those things like people tell you like, oh, you can make the time for it. I'm like, no, that's not really how it happens. How it happens is you think about it a little differently. You don't shame or guilt or humiliate yourself. Remember, that's armor. When we're shaming and guilting and humiliating ourselves or others, we're throwing up armor instead of being vulnerable and saying, yeah, that never worked for me, all right? It was just me thinking of time differently. And that's the reason why we actually have modern leadership, because we think of things differently, right? A lot of things differently, because as a leader, you have to think of things differently than a follower, right? So working from scarcity, what she says is the opposite of that. The ability of getting through that is practicing gratitude, right? What is it that you're thankful for? What is it that you appreciate the most right now about it? What do you like really love the most about your life right now? Because when you do that, you'll see it starts to focus on a different feeling in your body. And when you have a different feeling in your body, you'll start to take actions that are in alignment with keeping that thing. That's just the way that it works. And it's such a powerful thing. She also said something about recognition. So recognition, she says, has emerged from daring leadership data as essential to developing brave leaders and courage in cultures. So one of the things that we can do, not only when we're practicing gratitude, is also recognizing other people out in public. There's this concept that Josh taught me that's like, what gets recognized gets repeated. If you have something, you want your kids to keep, folding their clothes or their laundry. You want your clients to keep showing up and taking massive action. You want your team to continue to do brave things. Then when they do that, you have to recognize them in public. I can't tell you, like my daughter, like hopefully, she'll watch this when she gets a little bit older, probably. Like one of the things that I do is like any time that she does something that I'm like, oh man, I'd love it if she kept doing that, I recognize her for it. I say, I am so proud of you for being able to do this, for being able to take this action despite being uncomfortable. This was awesome. You're a great leader. And she gets all happy and all excited. And guess what? She does it again next time. Now, 2 things. Number 1 is I'm not just saying that because I want her to do it again, even though I do love that she does it again. Number 2 is I do want to recognize her because I want her to see that she is. Like, that's the reason why, because I really feel that way. I'm not using it to manipulate. I'm using it because I really want her to see and feel recognized for doing that, but also it's just going to make her want to do it more often. What's crazy when you do this in a group environment, so if I was in a roll call with 20 police officers and I recognize somebody for making an outstanding arrest, or like having an arrestee who ultimately at the end, filled out a commendation saying like how nice this person was, right? I want to recognize that for everybody because number 1, that officer is going to be like, wow, this is really awesome. I need to keep doing this. But then everybody else in the room, not everybody else, because there's the old timers in the back who are just going to talk trash all the time. But most of the room are going to be like, if I want to get recognized, that's what I should do. So recognizing people is one of those really important things. If you haven't done that, if you have a team, if you have a group, you have a one-on-one client, you have your kids, you have a significant other, I guarantee you, if you ask them or you recognize them for doing something, even if it's like unloading the dishwasher or whatever, like just being real and honest about like how helpful they are when they do that, I guarantee you they're going to be doing that more and more often, okay? All right, number 3, we're almost here at the end. Number 3 is numbing. So one of the things we can do is we can numb. She says we all numb, and we all have our versions of numb. This is like different. Some people use food, work, social media, shopping, television, video games, porn, booze, cleaning their house. Anybody ever had that where like it's time to work your business and your house is like the cleanest on the block? It's a numbing. It's something you're doing to numb, is what she describes it. I describe it kind of like as buffering, but it's basically numbing because you don't want to feel like the awkwardness or the pain or the struggle or the uncomfortableness or of being vulnerable in that moment, right? A perfect example of this is I help a lot of people in business, and they're having conversations in the DMs and shooting messages back and forth, and they send a message and they're getting a little nervous about like, what should they say? And so they shoot a message to somebody and they say, hey, I'm not sure if you saw my stories, but I have this program that is based on leadership books, and we have a free book club that we're creating right now. Would that be something you're interested in? And then what happens when somebody says yes? People start to freak out. And this could be for a paid program or even a free thing where they're like, hey, I have these one-on-one services. Would that be something you're interested in? And somebody says yes. In that moment, a lot of people who haven't done a lot of sales for their program or for their product yet, they start to go through this armor. It starts to go, well, like, who am I? Like, what am I going to say? How am I going to help them? All these kind of things kind of like come up, and you kind of want to run the opposite way. This is when you want to go clean your house. This is when you want to go see what the kids are doing. This is when you want to like literally close your laptop and say that I'll hit it tomorrow. I'll talk about it tomorrow. But these are those vulnerable moments, right? Because you don't know what you're going to say, or if you're going to say it right, or they're going to say yes, or they're going to say no, but you'll never know if you never ask, right? I always find the best way to do this is if you were having like your conversation with your best friend, what would you tell them? Right? What would you tell them? What's crazy is like when we have like a movie that we're really excited about, when we have like some kind of like restaurant that we're like super excited about, we're screaming at the mountaintops. We're like, guys, you need to go see this movie. It is off the hook, right? But then whenever something involves our business or it involves us, then we're like, oh man, I'm not really sure if I should. What if you shared it with the same level of enthusiasm with them and let them decide, right? If they're like, yeah, I'm not going to really like this movie. I'm not going to go see it. And you're going to like, oh, that's cool. That's no worries at all. What if you felt the same way about your business or the conversations you're having with your significant other, all these kind of things, instead of going to the numbing agencies, right? Which is like, how can I numb this? How can I get out of this feeling and go to somewhere else? Vulnerability is the actual opposite. It's when you're thinking about like this situation that's coming up and it's starting to feel vulnerable. And instead of running the opposite direction, you lean in and you ask more questions and you find out what's actually the culprit, what actually get to the root of the problem. Like we talk about life coaching, right? We get to the root of the actual problem. We don't put a Band-Aid on a broken arm or pretend like it's, going to get better on its own. We lean in and we're willing to do those uncomfortable things. Now, what she says is when it comes to how does she call it? Numbing. Sorry, my brain always goes back to buffering. When she goes back to numbing, she says the best way to do that is to set boundaries and find your real comfort. So she says, in the end, the cure for numbing is developing tools and practices that allow you to lean into discomfort and renew your spirit. First, when we're feeling that edge, instead of asking ourselves, what is the quickest way to get these feelings to go away? By the way, that's what our brain is asking us. You don't realize it because it's subconscious, but your brain is like, I don't like feeling this way. Let's feel somewhat other way. What's the quickest way to feel some other? And it's like, oh, I'm going to grab some food, going to go clean the house, going to do whatever, right? Because I got to clean the house. I mean, there's laundry that's over here, right? And your brain will now go into that mechanism, and then you'll feel a little bit more comfortable because you won't have to be attending to that thing. She says, instead of asking yourself that question, stop and ask yourself, what are these feelings and where did they come from? Where are these feelings and where did they come from? That is such a critical question. And I think this is the great part to kind of like end this call, because this question is one that you can reflect on this entire week. And I promise you, you will learn so much about yourself and so much about how to lean in and be vulnerable by asking yourself that question. What are these feelings and where did they come from? They come from our thoughts. They come from our stories. They come with the things, the beliefs that we have in here, a lot of times unconscious, but how we can change them is leaning into them, becoming aware of them, and then making a different decision if we choose to go that route. And it all comes from us stopping, going, okay, I'm feeling this certain way in my body. What is causing me to feel this way? Do I think I'm going to say something wrong? Do I think like I'm going to be salesy? Do I feel like I'm going to be, yell at my kids? Do I feel like I'm going to learn something that I don't want to learn? Have you ever had that happen? You're having a conversation. You're like, I feel like I don't want to have this conversation because I don't know what they're going to tell me. Well, it's still out there. It's just you don't know it. So I know for me, I'm like, I want to know it, even if it hurts a little bit, because those are the greatest opportunities to grow as a leader, is when you know what actually is like who your foe is, right? Rather than just pretending like it doesn't exist. Such a powerful read so far, guys. And I do want to hear from you guys. What has been your biggest aha moment from today's live? So if you're here live, I want to hear in the comment section. If you're not here on the live and you're just watching this replay, I also want to hear in your comments, what was your biggest aha moment from today's call? What are those feelings and where did they come from? Exactly, Julie. Like focusing on that is definitely going to be my biggest takeaway. And instead of leaning out, lean in and get to the root of your issues. Remember, having feelings, there's nothing wrong with having feelings, but the worst thing that could literally happen is a feeling. Like it's the feeling of uncomfortableness, the feeling of shame or guilt or humiliation. Like that's the worst thing that could happen in your body. But there's so much that you can accomplish, so much more that you could lead, so much more that you can influence other people, so much more that you can model the right behavior when you're willing to feel it and do something else entirely different, right? So proud of you guys for doing that. If you got to the end of this video and you're enjoying it and you're new, definitely subscribe to our channel, and definitely I'll leave you the link to the book club in the comments and the description below. If you're not a part of that, definitely sign up. We have a part inside of our free app as we share, as we go throughout the week. I've shared a few times last week. I definitely would love to hear your guys' biggest takeaways. And Edith was like, lean in, 100%. Shannon says the armor that we put on, right? I like to think about this also like as if I'm putting physical armor on. And anytime that kind of feeling of ego comes up, I'm like, I got to take my armor off. It's time to take it off. It's crazy because like in police work, I had real armor that I had to take off. And so I kind of think about it that way, like it's time to take this off so I can really lean in and make the biggest impact that I possibly can. Guys, I appreciate you so much for making it here to the end, for being a part of the book club, for leaning in, for being willing to dare to lead. We are going to continue with number 4 starting next Thursday. Keep reading about 10 pages a day. Let me know inside of the app, like as you go, what your biggest takeaways are. And I look forward to seeing you guys then, all right? Have an incredible week. Keep leading from the front. And I appreciate you for what you do out there every single day. All right, guys. See you soon. Bye.